Today, you are going to get a real out-of-the-box comparison between the LG G4 and the S95D. One of the reasons why I like to do the out-of-the-box comparisons this way is because it is going to be the best way to see it out of the box as if you bought it at the store. That's always been my goal with this channel, and that's what I'm going to keep delivering with these comparisons. Alright, so let's get into some of the design differences with these TVs. As for a stand in the box, 55-inch and 65-inch G4, they are including a stand in those boxes, but 77-inch and 83-inch and 97-inch are not having a stand in the box. You also have the 5-year panel warranty with the G4, where the S95D, you do not have that. And then when it comes down to the G4 and MLA, then you are looking at only the 97-inch not having MLA. When we're looking at the S95D, one of the bigger separators there is going to be the One Connect box. This is going to be a box that has all 4 HDMI 2.1 ports on the back of the box as well as other connections, and you will have that separated from the TV itself. The G4 has all the ports on the back of the TV like a traditional TV. Now, when it comes down to the actual sound performance of these TVs, they're both pretty lackluster, to be honest with you. Not really anything to write home with, which is kind of sad because the S95D you would think is going to be a more capable TV with all those speakers on the back of the TV. It just doesn't seem to give you much oomph when it comes down to the sound performance, but the sound clarity is really good on the S95D. There's a little bit more bass from the G4, although that seems to lack a little bit of sound clarity, as some things can sound a little bit tinny from time to time. I'm not a fan of either sound system, but I would probably give the edge to the S95D just based on the dialogue clarity that you're getting from the S95D. Oh, there's one more thing I cannot forget to mention, and that is going to be the screen coating itself. The S95D doesn't have your traditional screen coating when it comes down to OLED TVs. It has what they call the OLED glare-free coating. And this is going to be something that diffuses light, makes it appear a little bit softer, but spreads it across the whole entire screen, and so that can be distracting for some viewers. But I've also seen situations where the S95D was the best looking TV in a bright room, and the G4 was giving me mirror-like reflections in comparison to it. So it can be good for certain room types. It really does depend on your environment. In a dark room, however, they're both really good, and I had no complaints on either in a dark room. Alright, now let's evaluate picture quality, and let's start with brightness. When it comes down to the brightness capability of these TVs, with white brightness in mind and color brightness in mind, let's talk about just brightness in general. It doesn't have to even be separated right now. It does appear that the LG G4 looks like the brighter TV most of the time, although I do not think this is actually the case because there are times where the S95D does look significantly brighter than the LG G4. So that's a really odd thing when you are comparing these TVs to see those little anomalies, and a lot of that has to do with some very complicated measures involving tone mapping. Can't really get into it without confusing everybody in this video, so I really won't. But what you're seeing is going to be the difference in tone mapping between the two sets when you're talking about brightness most of the time. Now, one of the times that it does absolutely look brighter than the G4 is when color is involved at high luminance. You will notice the color brightness of the TV shining through on the S95D over the LG G4, where the LG G4 will lose color at times. And now I really want to specify that there is going to be times where the G4 looks like it's losing color more than the S95D a lot because of the default tone mapping that is used on the TV. But when you set the tone mapping to professional, you will notice less of that if you set this up correctly. The problem is not everybody and most people won't be setting this up on their TVs. So I do have to call out the G4 for losing color at high brightness levels when it comes down to just the way that LG is setting up the tone mapping out of the box. However, I do want to stress that when setting the TV to professional mode, you can retain a lot of the colors and fight with the QD OLED on a lot of scenes, no matter what you're throwing at it, but there are still going to be scenes like this one where the S95D is going to look like the brighter, more colorful TV overall. Now, I want to stress this is in higher graded content. In most content, I doubt you're going to run into an issue where you really hate the color of the LG G4. It's really when you stress these TVs out and put them side by side where you can notice these differences. When it comes down to actual brightness, on the topic of this, looking at the LG G4, you could see that there are times where it manipulates the brightness more than the S95D. Whether this is intended or not is totally just something I don't know. LG is doing it though, and it is something that you can see. Now, admittedly, this is leading to better picture depth overall when it comes down to the TVs. It also appears that the G4 is the clearer, sharper TV overall, and it does appear that the LG G4 is maybe over sharpening a little bit more than the S95D, or it is using some sort of edge enhancement processing. Now, you can make up some of this difference by increasing the sharpness on the S95D, but it is going to lead to more artifacts than what you would see on the LG G4. So something that the G4 is doing to create a little bit more sharpness but control the artifacts is definitely going on. That said, you can still see ringing on the LG G4 at times if you go look for it. Now, to be honest, I found this to be an odd decision from LG because they usually stray to just the creator's intent, and this deviates from a lot of the way that they were thinking in the past. This is more of the Sony route, where they are going to enhance the picture a little bit with some edge enhancement and things that create a little bit more depth within the picture with processing. I also mentioned the manipulation of the brightness. All of these things combined does add to more of a three-dimensional look for the LG G4. Be it fair or not, it's what I'm seeing with my eyes, and I actually do like what I'm seeing overall. So I do hope that Samsung kind of goes this route of cheating the system a little bit and doing some edge enhancement, maybe doing a little bit more within those movie modes. Now, one thing I usually don't speak about too much is motion because it is really subjective, but I'll say this with motion in mind. Both TVs deliver a really good motion experience overall. The Samsung does have a little bit of quirks involved where it does have sort of a micro stutter when switching scenes, but this is something that I personally didn't notice a lot and wasn't bothered by, though other people may, so that's something to be aware of. When it comes down to the LG G4, I didn't have any issues at all with the LG G4's motion. Alright, let's talk about movies and TV shows, and one of the things that I want to bring up in this topic is going to be the actual green push and magenta push that you get from these TVs. The S95D does push a little bit of magenta. You'll see it from time to time. Clouds tend to look a little bit magenta, where you can look at the G4 and things can look a little bit like they're pushing some green. Now, this is definitely more noticeable on camera than in person, and only when they are side by side do I really notice these differences. If I'm watching them by themselves, I can adjust and I'm not really bothered by these issues, but it is something that I want to call out is there for these TVs. Let's look at some examples from some movies, and I've got some stills here that can demonstrate a few different things. One thing I can't be too certain of is when there's actual brightness manipulation going on and when the S95D is actually experiencing some ABL, which is the automatic brightness limiter in these OLED TVs that can kick in for very bright scenes. Because there's times, again, where the G4 does look just significantly brighter than the S95D. And also, this could stem from the tone mapping that we discussed earlier. They all have different tone mapping algorithms, and it's very confusing to figure out what is going on when you're looking at them side by side. So the result of that is that all you can really notice is sometimes the G4 is brighter than the S95D, and then sometimes the S95D is brighter than the G4. We really don't know what the reason is for that, but it does appear they just trade blows. And you could see that just by looking at some of the stills that I'm showing you here from the movies that we're looking at. Aquaman was one of the ones where, yes, they did trade blows from time to time, and there was times where when it came to color brightness, of course, the S95D was the clear winner there, but when it came down to just brightness in general, the G4 did seem to outshine the S95D at times, which again is definitely odd because I think the S95D is the more capable TV, but it appears the G4 is the brighter TV overall in the majority of scenes that I'm seeing on the TVs when I'm comparing them side by side. Which is another reason why you can't just go off of screen brightness measurements when it comes down to TVs. You have to factor in the TV's behavior in regards to tone mapping. There's so many other different factors that goes along with brightness, not just measurements. For standard dynamic range viewing, which is not HDR content, I am not showing you that today, but what I can tell you about SDR is that you are going to get the brighter SDR performance out of the S95D, and that is something that I just noticed when they are side by side. Is it significantly different? It's not huge, but you are going to get a really good performance out of both of these in regards to SDR brightness for an OLED TV. If you're looking for more SDR brightness, consider something like the Bravia 9. Alright, now let's move on and talk about game mode. So unlike the G3 last year, the G4 doesn't really take a hit in game mode when it comes down to switching from outside of game mode to inside of game mode. The color brightness is still there, making both TVs excellent for gaming, and you can't go wrong with choosing either for game mode. I will say that the S95D is certainly the more capable TV for gaming overall. Because we're talking about the S95D being a QD OLED, it's going to take advantage of more games that are able to produce higher color brightness, and you will see this in games more than you do with movies. It's just the way that the content is these days. And you will see this from time to time like you do in this Hot Wheels game right here. And that's one of the examples that I've been using because it is one of those games where it really does bring out the color. But there's a variety of different games out there where you can see the differences, and the S95D is certainly the more colorful TV overall when it comes down to this. When it comes down to the actual gaming performance in more cinematic games, storytelling games, it's really going to be boiling down to the features that you want on these TVs. For example, the S95D has an exclusive feature called Game Motion Plus, which is motion interpolation for gaming that you only find on Samsung TVs, but you may not even dabble in this mode at all, so it's totally going to be based on your preferences and what you would use overall for gaming. Another thing to keep in mind with the S95D is that the SDR brightness is going to be significantly better than the G4's SDR brightness in game mode because there is no limitation when it comes down to your peak brightness setting. Now, when it comes down to the colors that you see in games, one thing that you may notice in skies, sometimes there is color banding. And you can also see this within different game elements as well, not just in the skies. This is something you see less of on the S95D. They have a pretty good always on smooth gradation filter. But when it comes down to the LG G4, the smooth gradation doesn't work at all. It just does not appear to work. No matter what you do with the smooth gradation setting, it won't take any effect. So you will see color banding within your games with the LG G4. Alright, so which one of these TVs should you buy? And if you guys are interested in buying either of these TVs, I have the links for both of these in the description below. They are affiliate links, and using them will help support the channel, so I can't thank you guys enough for doing that. Now, when it comes down to which should you buy, in my opinion, it really comes down to your personal preferences. For me personally, I'm looking at the G4 over the S95D for movies. But when it comes down to gaming, I like the S95D over the G4. But your opinion could be completely different based on what you value in your picture quality, performance, and if you're taking the screen coating into consideration, that is some things that I can't factor in for you. So when it comes down to that, they're both really good values for what you're getting out of the TV once they are in that marked down price range. Right now, it appears to be they are both kind of overpriced, to be honest with you, and I would wait for the Black Friday markdown if you are really interested in buying these TVs at their cheapest possible price. Wait a little bit and you will get that. If money is not a concern and you want to get the best set possible, these are two of the best on the market by far. If you're somebody who watches mainly vivid mode and has a lot of high brightness settings in mind for your TV, then I think maybe looking at the Bravia 9 over these TVs might actually be a better route to take. And we could discuss that in a future video, but if you want to see the comparison between the Bravia 9 and the LG G4, I did that one right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.